Thanks to the recent remake, Dead Space is back in the limelight and arguably more popular than ever. Today, however, I wanted to go back in time to the other game that the Dead Space developers over at Visceral Games made, and I'm not talking about Battlefield Hardline. I want to talk about a 2010 video game adaptation of an Italian epic from all the way back in 1555, Inferno, taken from Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. I'm going to go ahead and let you know that I'll be trying to preserve monetization in this video the best I can, while also discussing in depth both the game and the poem, comparing and contrasting the two while offering some insight on them as we go. This will be a lot more difficult than you might think. So, welcome to Dante's Hell, and let's see how Visceral's interpretation of it holds up. Dante's Inferno is one of the most gruesome video games available on the 6th generation consoles. Often referred to as a God of War clone, the primary gameplay loop of this game is 20% exploration and platforming, and 80% hyper-violent hacking and slashing, which I shouldn't have to tell you is awesome. All that being said, I want to go ahead and warn you that there will be a lot of blurring because there's a lot of things in this game that are not fit for YouTube, so try to bear with me. Depending on how prudish you are, this game could even be considered as anti-Christian, but as a very Christian man myself who loves the source material, I can tell you, although this game is not for everyone given its violence, gore, and nudity, it is a depiction of hell. You know, the most awful place in all of existence. A video game that not only acknowledges the existence of hell, but also the power of the cross, feels plenty respectful to me. It's a game for adults. If you're bothered by the content as a grown man, your life has been too soft and you are too soft. The developers have even gone on record in interviews talking about how they wanted to ensure the gratuitousness was done appropriately, as a constant reminder of the abominations of sin and the tormentuous nature of eternal damnation. All of that being said, it is a video game, so it's going to be over the top and silly. Try not to take it too seriously. The developers have taken a lot of liberties with the source material, which is to be expected. In the poem, Dante is more of a political figure as he wanders through hell. He is just a wanderer. In the game, Dante is a warrior from the Crusades. He is a really bad man, having committed many atrocities in his life during his tenure as a soldier. Murder, theft, adultery, fornication, treachery, etc. He was a monster of a man. It's a pretty big difference, but I get it. His new design is breathtaking, and he's one of the coolest looking protagonists I think I've seen. The cross shown on his chest isn't a tattoo, it's a tapestry that has been physically sewn into his skin, depicting all of his sins and transgressions. He wears his own evil on himself, a constant and painful reminder of his need for repentance and forgiveness. The Dante of the book and the one in the game really couldn't be further apart from each other. Visceral's Dante is a flawed action hero. The poem's Dante is far more accurate to how a man would react upon seeing such terrors. Another character Visceral has taken great liberties with is Beatrice. In the poem, Beatrice was in heaven already, and Dante had to make his way to his beloved wife in heaven by walking first through the Inferno, then into Purgatorio, and finally arriving in Paradiso. Well, in the game, the devil takes a keen interest in her and, tries to cuck Dante with her, and she, gets into it. Dante has to try to fight and save his wife from this evil demonic brainwashing that has possessed her. There's a hell wedding. Although this is completely different from the poem, it sort of rings rather familiar in a contemporary setting regarding a lot of modern relationships. I think the author was likely just reading too much Berserk. This is both the biggest deviation from the poem and also my least favorite aspect. Virgil is a character brought over from the poem as well. Funnily enough, his role in the game is pretty much the same as it was in the poem. He guides Dante through hell. In the poem, he walks with Dante, however, and speaks with him throughout the journey. In the game, he sort of just waits at certain intervals throughout the game, and Dante arrives to interact with him. In both iterations, Virgil agrees to help Dante reach Beatrice by moving through the layers of hell with him. In the poem, however, Beatrice requests that Virgil seek Dante and helps him reach her in heaven. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, that is not how it happens in the game. But they did cleverly integrate Virgil into this new retelling. Beatrice does request it of Virgil, but obviously she's not waiting in heaven for him in this game. The bulk of the story here was written literally centuries ago, so I'm going to spoil it all. If you were hoping to avoid spoilers though, then abandon all hope, ye who enter here. We join Dante just moments before this all takes place, as he's fighting during the Crusades, fending off dozens of Saracens as ships in the distance fire off catapults into the city. The art direction between the animated cutscenes meshing into the gameplay is utterly brilliant. It feels visceral, pun intended. This serves as a phenomenal introduction to both the narrative and the gameplay, as you're learning how to control Dante against these men that are trying to kill you. Or that you are trying to kill. I'm focusing on this game as it is, so I will not be doing any kind of comparisons to other games. I will say it one time right now. Yes, this feels very much like God of War and Devil May Cry. It's incredibly similar in terms of gameplay, but I think that serves the game. It's not trying to do something new, it's trying to do something well, and I think it succeeds. I really enjoy the gameplay on offer here, and it feels tight and responsive. The progression is really satisfying throughout the game, so I was more than happy with it. The primary comparisons I'll be making are between the game and the poem it's attempting to adapt, and later in the video I'll talk about the animated movie adaptation of the game as well. After fending off the attacking forces, Dante makes some headway into this city before he is suddenly and very literally stabbed in the back. Now from this sequence on, the player needs to just accept that this game is absolutely jumping the shark and going all in on the most fantastical of elements. Because the literal Grim Reaper manifestation of death itself arrives to bring Dante to his fate.
Everlasting damnation for your sins.
But that's not possible. The bishop assured us.
Come, face eternity. Soon you'll be joined by those whose lives you have ruined, whose souls you have damned.
I will not let my sins damn those dear to me. I will redeem myself.
Mortal, you are mine.
He tells Dante that due to his sins, his soul has been damned to eternal suffering. Well, Dante doesn't like that very much because he was promised that if he joined in on this holy crusade and fought this holy war, all of his sins would be permanently absolved, meaning he would be sent to heaven if he died. That was a lie from the bishop, however. Dante is not absolved of any sins currently, and he has committed a heavy amount since joining the war. Rather than answer to his mistakes, Dante, and follow me here, fights and kills death. Alright, whatever, let's go with it. This sequence serves as a tutorial for what boss battles will be like, which is pretty cool, I think. It demonstrates the controls and prepares the player for what they can expect going forward. The best part about this fight, I think, is the scenery. Just look at this swirling vortex. The colors and the visuals, like it's getting you ready for what you're about to witness. Surprisingly, Dante manages to overcome and defeat death in combat, keeping his scythe for himself, which is the big weapon you see in all the promotional material. The literal Grim Reaper's scythe is Dante's primary weapon. After this, Dante begins his trek to find his family and return home. This is what was happening in the opening cutscene where you see Dante sewing a tapestry into his skin, which I want to talk about for a little bit since I skipped over it before. The first thing you see in the game right when you start the story is a dark forest. In this dark forest sits Dante at a campfire as he cleans a bloody needle before resuming the act of sewing this thick tapestry onto his skin on his chest. The reason for this is to remind him of his sins. He is burdened with immense guilt for what he did during the Crusades. If you're wondering what he did, don't worry, we're going to get to that. The tapestry itself depicts various acts that he committed and when all accounted for makes him a perfect candidate for every circle of hell. It's after that sequence of him screaming while sewing into his skin that we start the flashback and are taken to the game's opening sequence that we just covered of him during the siege. So now after that flashback, we're back with Dante as he finally finds his home, only to see his family murdered and his wife dead on the ground. This scene is where everything starts to fall apart, and I mean that literally. His wife Beatrice's spirit rises out of her body and manifests before Dante, as she says almost in relief that she knew he would come for her. It's a lovely scene until right after that, black smoke takes the form of several serpents and slithers across the ground to envelop her ghostly figure. She claims she gave her word, so she must go before she is taken away by the smoke. She is referring to Lucifer here, because she made a deal with the devil. Standing from his wife's dead body just outside of his own house, we see demons start to resurrect from the ground in his yard and begin to fight them off. Killing and slicing and dicing, trying to chase down who or what killed his family, Dante pursues into the dark woods. Only the further he chases, the stranger things become. As he makes his way up the hill, he comes upon a large stone church that appears to still be under construction, as he finds his dead wife's spirit on an altar, as she asks Dante why he broke his promise, before her spirit is then lifted and sucked away from him again. Dante sees on the altar a burning blue outline of the cross he is wearing on his side. It was Beatrice's cross. He places the cross onto the altar's outline and begins to pray, asking God to give him the strength to push forward. The cross is blessed, but Dante feels a sudden pain in his chest as we are taken into his tapestry once more, showing us another animated flashback where he swears an oath with his beloved to forsake all pleasures of the flesh until he returns from his crusade. He grips the cross, and then we are taken to another flashback where his entire brigade is promised that all of them will be absolved of all of their sins as payment for their actions in the crusade. You can probably tell where this is going, but if you know anything about Christian theology at all, you know that it doesn't work like that. Then we're taken back to Dante, where the church around him begins to literally crumble and fall apart as the ground beneath him opens up into a massive earthquake. We have to fight a horde of demonic griffins here as the ground beneath us falls into the fiery abyss below. Without even thinking, Dante begins trying to survive the quake, climbing down and avoiding different environmental dangers as he descends downwards, seemingly not even realizing yet where he is going. Fighting his way through a host of demonic zombies, he continues to climb down until he comes across a deformed-looking man standing in front of a massive ornate door. This is, of course, Virgil, who informs Dante that Beatrice asked of Virgil to find Dante and guide him through hell to her, which, as we talked about before, is pretty consistent with the source material, just in a way different context. In the poem, Beatrice was in heaven the whole time. There's been a lot of liberties taken here, but I can see that they are trying to stick somewhat close to the original poem. Here, we're introduced to a really sick beast control sequence where Dante rides on the back of a demonic minotaur and controls it to kill and crush a host of demons. It's a little weird to control, but it's fun. I think this was a good way to introduce this mechanic too, because it comes up a few more times later. It can even breathe fire, but it's a short section before you've crushed all of the enemies. Dante then uses the Minotaur to literally open the gates of hell. There's no turning back now. We've come all this way. There's nowhere to go but down. Way down. The blind world. Put all fear and cowardice aside. We've arrived to the shores of Acheron. Burning bodies literally rain from the sky. In the poem Before Limbo, Dante describes the prior area as the vestibule of hell, wherein millions of trapped souls march up and down endless valleys and cliffsides, all marching aimlessly behind a blank flag while being stung repeatedly by hornets the entire time. This vestibule and punishment is for the lukewarm, the fence-sitters. Indecisive men and women are referred to as opportunists, neither good nor bad. And in the poem, the angels who didn't take a side in the war against God suffer here as well, forever following behind an aimless banner that will never be planted. In the game, however, it's a little different. We don't get to see the aimless marching of banners and hornets, but instead it's burning bodies falling from the sky as they're cast into hell for their punishment. We've entered into limbo, and ahead of us is Charon's vessel, waiting to take us deeper into hell. So the thing about Dante's interpretation of hell, as written in the 1500s, is that it was layered with various aspects of other mythologies, predominantly from the Greeks' ancient theologies, but also with Roman and some others. When the Divine Comedy released, it was actually pretty controversial. which I know it's a classic and beloved book now, but at the time, Dante's mixing elements of non-Christian mythologies into a story based on Christian theology was seen as potentially heretical. A lot of that was also likely due to Dante's depicting many people as suffering in hell who were still alive at the time or whom had recently passed, which led to the scorn of many of his peers who found it to be in poor taste, but I'll get to that later. We can see the game staying true to the original poem it is adapting in that sense, as it depicts Charon the ferryman within limbo, taking souls deeper into hell. This is pulled directly from Charon the ferryman of Hades, who took souls into the underworld found in Greek mythology. Common depictions are of a boat and a hooded figure. The game instead opted for a massive ship with a giant anthropomorphic head protruding out of the front.
All souls that die from every nation collect here as one. Charon's rough crossing awaits those who did not fear the Lord.
On the way to board Charon's ship, we'll carve through some demons until we arrive at a tortured soul. This introduces a mechanic where the game strays from the book. In the poem, Dante does indeed encounter various well-known figures from history who were burning in hell. However, in the game, when he encounters these figures, the player can make a choice to either punish them into the lake of fire or absolve them of their sins and allowing them into heaven. As a gameplay mechanic, this is interesting, because punishing souls deeper into hell grants you unholy points, which can be used to upgrade your scythe, and absolving them grants you holy points, which upgrades your cross. This kind of makes you choose which gameplay style suits you more between up close and ranged. Me being the stylish, good Christian boy I am, I pretty much always opted to absolve so I could max out my cross. From a theological standpoint, however, this is beyond silly. The Christian faith is pretty clear that once a soul is damned to hell, that's it, game over. The Islamic and Judaic faiths share this same viewpoint as well. Damnation is a permanent thing, so there's not a way out once you're in. Moreover, no human would have the capability needed to absolve a soul from its sins from hell, even if he was able to get to hell, as only Jesus Christ can do that. From a Catholic or Orthodox view, I believe they say that a priest has the authority to absolve a person of their sins, but that view is not shared by most Protestant denominations, and in all aspects it can only be done on earth, not from hell. I'm getting off track. The first of these tortured souls we come across is Pontius Pilate. If you don't know who that is, he's the Roman governor who presided over Jesus Christ's trial before the crucifixion. His damnation is to hell because of sending Christ to be crucified. However, he only suffers in limbo, the earliest circle of hell, because he truly did not want to crucify Christ and tried to convince the Jewish people not to have Christ crucified, instead offering Barabbas, the murderer, to be crucified instead. They made their choice, however, and demanded Christ be crucified, and all Pontius Pilate said was, "So be it." In Matthew, Pontius Pilate is quoted as saying, "I wash my hands of this innocent man," as he walked away to let Christ be crucified. That is why you can hear him screaming here, "Please, his own people gave him up."
His own people gave him up!
The excerpts of these historical figures are always interesting to me, but Pontius Pilate is such a profound first choice for this mechanic, I think. The caption for him reads, "His cowardice contributed to the suffering of one for the sins of many, and now he bears the weight of all in limbo." Note that the word "one" is capitalized as it references Jesus Christ. The developers of this game in an interview said that they wanted the game to feel like the Greek myths from a Christian lens, and they weren't trying to be preachy or anything, so I appreciate the lengths they seem to have gone in order to pay respect to the Christian religion without seeming to represent some kind of message. This isn't trying to be a religious game any more than God of War is trying to be a religious game, but I recognize that they're being respectful of the religion in which they've chosen to base their game on. Back to Charon. Dante boards the sentient ship as it heads deeper into hell, crawling on the wall of the ship, which is made up of suffering corpses. There's some puzzle stuff introduced here as well. It's not hard or anything, it's honestly just a way to break up the pacing of the gameplay loop from the hack and slash combat a bit. Sailing on the rivers of Acheron now, we get a set piece as we fight a horde of demons on this boat before we mount another one of these big beasts and literally rip Charon's head off and just launch it into the side of a building. Using the beast, we climb up the side of a different building as it crumbles down, and it's all just epic, for lack of a better word. We're in for our first boss battle now, Minos. We can hear him casting different souls into their respective circles to be damned for eternity, shouting where they shall be cursed to suffer. Charon's head is stuck in the side of this building, so let's just send him on his way. This is where Visceral really wanted to show us they meant business about the gruesomeness of hell. Dante encounters here a horde of demon babies, infants who died unbaptized and so were sentenced to hell, having died without the sacrament of baptism to absolve them. I want to note that most Christian theology does not actually preach that this is the outcome for unbaptized infants. There are some cases of this, but most Christian faiths and the New Testament suggest that a soul will not be sentenced to hell for its sins if they are incapable of recognizing that they are sinful. Therefore, those not capable of comprehending remorse are also not capable of comprehending guilt. In the poem, Dante did place unbaptized infants in limbo, but depicted them as existing in a limbo without suffering, alongside with what he referred to as virtuous non-Christians. This idea wasn't so different from the idea of limbo presented by the church at the time, but it had never previously left room for any non-Christians, just unbaptized babies, I think. For the aesthetic of the game, however, it brings about the cruel and unwavering nature of the place where Dante resides, showing these infants as demonic creatures now, which Dante must fight. The devs took liberties on this one for sure, but whatever. The final area of Limbo, we finally meet Minos, the blind judge of the damned, a filthy, slimy creature whose eyes have been blinded and who judges the souls he receives to the circle they belong in. Technically, this character is supposed to be at the start of the Circle of Lust, but in the game it feels more like he's at the end of Limbo. The boss battle is pretty cool too, I think, where he taunts Dante for believing he could be given grace for his actions in the war by a mere mortal. Eventually, Dante does kill this creature, and in spectacular fashion, I think. Following this, Dante has to swing between ropes as he descends even further down until we find one of the weaker circles, in my opinion, but I feel sort of torn on it. In order to properly demonstrate the depraved and reprehensible nature of this sin and circle, the game would have ended up rated adults only and gotten cancelled on Twitter. So I appreciate that they expressed some reservation on it, but it is pretty forgettable overall, I feel. I get that they did the best they could within the context of the time period and trying to keep it in a classy way where people would actually play through it. The first soul we encounter in Lust is Francesca da Platona, who fell in love with the younger brother of her deformed husband before she was found out and her husband had her and his younger brother killed. Again, this is appropriate to the circle, but ultimately forgettable, I think. Each of the circles has relevance to Dante himself, forcing him to look at his own past and recognize his own sins. In the Circle of Lust, Dante is reminded of his fornication and adultery against his wife, whom he is claiming to love. During the Crusades, Dante agreed to spare the life of a Saracen in exchange for sex with the man's, I think, wife, as offered by her. This, of course, is reprehensible and is the main reason Beatrice is now in hell. There's a lot of gross imagery littered around this area as well, a lot of phallic structures and other things I'm not going to show on YouTube. Very shortly after arriving, we are introduced to Cleopatra, of all people. She is a giant, monstrous beast who taunts Dante as she resides within the Storm of Lust. Speaking of which, that storm is literal. In the poem, the Circle of Lust depicts the souls who were swallowed up into the Circle of Lust as being cast about endlessly in a burning storm, which we get to see in the game as well. Some other notable figures from the poem make an appearance here as well, including Semiramis, a queen of Assyria who legalized a load of sexual vices and aided in the degenerate downfall of her own country. Upon reaching the top of the tower, Dante fights against historical figure Mark Antony, who serves Cleopatra. I'm not going to go into a history lesson of who Cleopatra and Mark Antony are, but in modern times this would be like a porn star and her biggest simp, essentially. He acts as a sort of final boss of Lust, and Dante has to kill them both, and then the tower begins to crumble as we watch Dante fall down on the same elevator he used to ascend the tower. Eventually, Dante has to swing out of this hell and land on the bridge before he must descend even deeper into the next circle of hell, which is Welcome to the circle of first world living, where the insatiable suffer in a vial of putrid slush as icy rain made up of what I believe is supposed to be liquid bile pours down upon those who are damned here. Addicts and overeaters, drunkards and sloths. Your overindulgence is what will send you here to suffer in the putrid liquids of gaseous fumes and intestinal textures.
For the ruinous fault of gluttony are these sad souls broken by the rain and the mud.
What is that beast below?
Cerberus, the great worm. As a dog that craves barking, then grows quiet when he snaps up his food, so are the foul faces of the demon Cerberus, who thunders over these souls.
Upon first arriving at the circle's entrance, Dante encounters the horrifying Cerberus. Most know this creature to be a dog with 3 heads, but in Dante's 6th canto of his Inferno poem, he actually describes it as a giant 3-headed worm. So appropriately, that is exactly what the developers have chosen to go with for this adaptation. He howls and consumes the gluttonous and guards the entrance to the 3rd circle. In the poem, Virgil gets past Cerberus by filling its mouth with mud. In the game, however, Dante takes a more direct approach. The environment here is terrifying. The sky is blood red, the ground is made of flesh with eyes and hair everywhere, organic matter permeates this entire area as we see worms writhing about within the ground. These worms took me a little getting used to, but once you figure them out, they're really not so bad. Playing this section really kills your appetite, which is exactly what it should do given the purpose of punishment for this circle. Deeper in, Dante encounters a man named Ciauco, a citizen of Florence who chose to use his life gorging his appetites and now suffers eternally for it. I chose to absolve him in my run, but if you punish him, his last statement is particularly relevant to modern culture. The gaping mouths and eyeballs staring at me in this scene were appropriately gross. The devs really nailed it here, I think. The poem isn't super detailed on this circle as it was with others, so the liberties taken, I feel, were well done and added to the game's overall benefit. Another soul we encounter is a woman named Clodia, who is described as a notorious gambler and drunkard, really hammering home that despite the organic theme of this circle, it's not only food that lands you here. Addictions and overindulgence of any kind can see you damned.
What these shades could not satisfy in life, in death they shall be denied for eternity.
Within Gluttony, as with the circles before it, Dante is forced to recognize his contributions to his own hellish fate, his sins that made him worthy of this circle, and a deeper development as to his tendencies to do so. We see these monstrous demons eating damned souls sent here to suffer for eternity, as Dante flashes back to his own gluttony. We see him indulging in drunkenness and overeating, criticizing one of his fellow soldiers who is attempting to call him out on it, saying,
"I made you a priest."
Right after this, we're shown even further in the past, Dante's father doing the same thing, and saying the same thing too. Lucifer then taunts Dante, and with his past transgressions saying, like father, like son.
Like father, like son.
All of this backstory is just an addition from the game developers. The real Dante who wrote the poem did not say any of this. We then see Dante's father making a move on his wife before they're both killed by someone who then runs off. This is where we're introduced to another very clever gameplay addition that really solidifies just how interesting this game is. Using these tunnels, we have to solve this 4D sort of puzzle in order to progress. It really took me a while to figure out what to do and to get used to how trippy the execution on this was, but the fact that they took the time to design this is really a testament to how phenomenal this game really is. Coming to the end of the 3rd circle, Dante finds his father damned to hell and turned into a demonic abomination, as we have another flashback to show his father stealing from the poor and using it to entertain his friends. We also see a child Dante watching his father's selfish nature take root in his own heart. And of course, that brings us right into Circle 4.
For the crime of greed do these souls suffer. Those clerks, a squint of mind, made no measured spending in life. And by contrast, in these popes and cardinals, greed practiced its excess.
The game calls this circle greed, but the more accurate translation I believe would be avarice, which basically means the same thing. You would think this is just the circle for greedy wealth hoarders, and it is, but Dante didn't let the other side of that coin off, the squanderers and the spendthrifts. In this circle lay greedy popes, clergymen, bishops, and cardinals who were greedy and manipulative to increase their wealth, but also the prodigal sons and spenders who throw all of their money away on nothing but dopamine hits and short-term fulfillment. Dante describes the circle as having nations of millions of men and women locked in an unending joust, one-on-one, pushing enormous stones into each other's chests, screaming at one another the same questions over and over for eternity. One shouts as he pushes the stone forward, "Why do you hoard?" And the other asks in turn as he pushes it right back, "Why do you waste?" The game falls flat on actually delivering us that on-screen depiction, but does manage to present something of equal interest, albeit with far less subtle and philosophical depth. We instead see vats of burning melted gold, with the infinite pools of the souls who burn perpetually in the same wealth they avariciously wasted their life to attain. If you look closely, you might see some Disney executives and congressmen in there. The combat loop is really coming into its full swing by this point, and the whole gold aesthetic being everywhere brought out a phenomenal backdrop for the feeling of finally getting the hang of how things play, while staying in theme with the circle. It also had me pondering my own greed as I played and tried to collect more points for upgrades, something I believe was not meta by design. Gone is the fleshy organic environment, replaced by cold stone gears and wheels and burning smelting mechanisms. A great juxtaposition from the previous circle. Dante comes across Tarpeia, a woman who allowed the Sabines to attack Rome by opening the city gates in exchange for gold and jewelry. She was what they call a Vestial Virgin, priestesses of the Roman goddess Vestia, whom were responsible for pleasing her for Rome's sake. The story goes that instead of gold and jewelry, after opening the gates of Rome, she was instead crushed to death by Sabine shields and thrown off a cliffside unceremoniously. For her greed, she found no Roman gods or goddesses, just eternal damnation in the fourth circle of hell. We're then introduced to these new enemy types that spin their mauls around. At first, they took me a minute to learn how to fight, but once you get the parrying down, they go fairly quickly. Honestly, I felt the game start to really rise and challenge around this area. Not only is this circle longer than the previous ones, it's a lot harder too. The game, clearly feeling more confident that you've gotten a handle on the mechanics, starts throwing more enemies at you than before, and expects you to deal with them.
Let not Brutus, the god of wealth, hinder your passage, whatever power the accursed wolf may have.
Dante comes across Plutos, the supposed god of wealth, and fittingly, it isn't a boss or a creature, it's an idol. A static statue made from gold. No power or capability but what may be given to it by those who idolize such wealth. Cutting down all the demons that are summoned to this area, we have to solve this puzzle in order to ascend the hands of the idol. And then we come face to face with the boss battle for greed. The boss here in the Circle of Avarice is a bit more personal to Dante than the previous boss battles, his own father. The entire time we fight him, he mocks Dante, calling him a bitter disappointment and criticizing his choices. One of the most chilling exchanges of the story takes place here. I'll just let it play.
So, you think you're a better man than your father?
I think I am too much the same man as my father.
Then turn back, coward!
Beatrice does not deserve this. I will not go back without her.
Then we'll find out who's the better man.
And this sequence is actually really difficult too. I had just a sliver of health left when the old demon finally killed over. The dialogue exchange between the two literally gave me chills as Dante confronts the damned soul of his father, the old man screaming at Dante to go ahead and blame him for his own shortcomings, to say it was his father's fault and dodge accountability. Where Dante shows us how he has grown from this confrontation, refusing to indulge in this behavior, but asking in shock, is all of this greed and hatred the only thing he had to offer his only son? Dante is accepting his shortcomings and recognizing the monster he was in his life. The burning hot cauldrons feel fitting for this, as it feels almost like a crucible, burning Dante down to the purest form he can be.
You're so full of greed and hate. Is that all you had to offer me? I'm not responsible for the man you are. And I will not be damned like you.
There is still much left to be done, however, as Dante continues his descent down deeper into the dark abyss below. Referred to more commonly as the Circle of Wrath, those damned here are cast into the swampy, revolting waters of the river Styx. Those who in life succumbed to their own wrathful temperament spend their eternity locked in constant physical altercation with one another, forced to physically fight. Those who were passively wrathful, satiating their wrathful tendencies through passive aggression and sullen attitudes, are buried beneath the slime that the outright aggressive fight atop, eternally submerged into a black sulkiness which, as Dante puts it in his poem, can find no joy in God or man or the universe.
See the souls over whom anger has prevailed. In the warm bath of the sun, they were once hateful. Down here in the black sludge of the river Styx, do they wish they had never been born?
Poet, will I be undone?
Do not fear, for no one can take from you this passage. By such a one it is granted you.
Even when climbing the cages of damned souls, we hear them cursing and threatening Dante, demonstrating that in this circle, they have been found static in that wretched state of perpetual agonizing anger and wrathfulness. There is no forgiveness in the hearts of those sent here. Dante is told by Virgil to locate Phlegyas, the boatman, and so that is our objective. We are shown another vision of Dante in his life, demonstrating a wrathful disposition towards hunting and slaughtering the forces that stood against him. It wasn't enough to reclaim the Holy Land, but he sought to slaughter heretics, not from a place of righteous anger, just a wrathful want to kill.
When are heretics worth a Christian life? Enough!
This tower sucks, by the way. I was being utterly slaughtered trying to ascend this thing because you're on a timer and you have to fight off the demons while also trying to break obstructions loose and move the mechanism so you can stay ahead of the flames. Way harder than you might think. Ascending this flaming tower, we're back to the poem territory as we see in the distance the city of Dis.
Now, my son, the city of Dis draws near, housing its condemned citizens within. The eternal fire that blazes there makes the mosques show red in this nether hell.
Has any soul ever before descended to this depth from the circles above?
Seldom, but once before I was conjured down by Erichtho. Shortly after my death, she sent me down to draw forth a soul from the circle of Judas.
Which circle is that?
The lowest, blackest, and farthest from heaven. Well do I know the way.
Looking around, we see this darkened sky filled with hordes of flying demons, really cementing that dark, gothic look as if they're bats descending down upon you. We then cross the Styx marsh atop this moving platform while fighting off more bat demons. Then we get this reveal where the platform stands up and shows itself to be the top of Phlegyas' head. Let me catch us up on the poem again. Phlegyas was the king of the Lapiths in the Greek mythology. In some of the Greek myths, he was known to be angry with the gods for killing his daughter, and that seems to be why Dante has placed him here due to his anger at the gods. This depiction of him is interesting as well. In the poem, he is but a boatman and ferried Dante and Virgil across the river Styx. It would seem the developers decided to make him a gigantic molten lava golem, which is a really cool set piece, but also a huge missed opportunity. I'll get to that in a minute. We have to fend off an arena of demons while Phlegyas attempts to crush or kill us the entire time before finally making it out of this area. This scene is where the game kind of loses its power, in my opinion. The plot about Beatrice having wagered her soul that Dante would be faithful to her, and so she literally swallows the seeds from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is just, it's stupid. I get the metaphors and all, but it feels like it turns what is for the most part this very interesting plot about self-reflection and introspection into a soap opera. Dante facing his sins and dealing with his guilt is already intense. We didn't need this plot about Beatrice marrying Lucifer out of spite. I can see the parallels to modern culture though, so at least the soap opera seems to have aged well. Dante finds new resolve and leaps upon the head of Phlegyas as he rides the demon towards the gates of Dis, and, well, I'm just gonna let this part play out.
We moved toward the city, secure in our holy cause, and beheld such a fortress. And on every hand I saw a great plain of woe and cruel torment. Bitter tombs were scattered with flame, made to glow all over, hotter than iron need be for any craft. And such dire laments issued forth as come only from those who are truly wretched, suffering, and forever lost.
This is the missed opportunity. What follows is a 3-minute set piece of Phlegyas just walking through on a straight path, and you don't get to fight or anything. I got to crush a small handful of demons, but why did you program this whole giant character if you only get to use it for literally 3 minutes? And I mean, actually, it's only 3 minutes. It makes no sense to me, and is actually a poor replacement for what occurs in the book, where fallen angels guard the gates of Dis and refuse to let Dante and Virgil in. Heaven sends an angel down from heaven to rebuke the fallen angels and force them to allow Dante and Virgil entry. In the game, he just breaks the gates open though. I get it, but it's less grand and epic. Also, this circle is really short, and I was in and out of anger in like 30 minutes because it was all centered around this set piece. I feel like greed was the longest circle so far. Eventually, Dante causes Phlegyas to stomp and destroy the bridge they're standing on, and the giant falls to his death as Dante reaches the 6th circle. Deep within the walls of the city of Dis lies the 6th circle of hell, Heresy.
Here you will find the heretics and followers of every cult and pagan sect, all buried together, burning in eternal fire.
Might those damned here be seen?
These tombs remain closed, until from Jehoshaphat and the Last Judgment, they return with the bodies they have left above.
It is one thing not to believe, it is another thing entirely to provoke. Here burn the heretics and devout followers of false religions. In the poem, Dante describes the city of Dis as having fiery, burning red mosques all over the place, as Muslims are heretics, and so they are damned to the circle of heresy for their devotion to a heretical doctrine. Here would also lie pagans, such as the Norse Vikings, Greeks, and more virtuous pagans are said to suffer in limbo, but the worst of them lay here. You see all those red tombs? Yeah, those are from the poem as well. They are burning hot coffins that contain all of those who believe that the soul dies with the body, damned to be stuffed into a burning hot claustrophobic tomb for eternity. The poem and the game reveal one of these to be Epicurus, a Greek philosopher and rival to Plato. He and his followers preached and practiced under the belief that when one dies, their soul dies with them. So Dante describes their fate as an infinite cremation, basically. The game really tries to manifest the heresy aspect, as you hear the voices of the damned whispering heresy to you as you climb. And there are depictions of upside-down crucifixions, which I'm curious about actually. This could be a reference to St. Peter, who asked to be crucified upside down because he said he was not worthy of being crucified in the same manner as Jesus Christ was, as in no heretic would be worthy of that kind of symbolism, but their life has led them to perpetual unworthy crucifixion. But something tells me it's not that deep. I feel like more likely it's just an inverted cross to try to signify a slight against the symbol, as many heretics choose to do as a fashion statement. This section where Virgil says this bit of dialogue I found to be incredibly well placed and profound.
Not long after my own death, I saw a mighty one come down and take forth from here a group of ancient shades. Our first parent, his son Abel, Noah, Abraham, and many others. The deep, foul valley trembled on all sides, and I thought the universe felt love.
This is such a strange bit of dialogue, and even more strangely, I can't find it anywhere in the poem. I can't find mention of it, but I sort of know what it's talking about. I believe that this dialogue is referring to the fact that before Christ dies for our sins on the cross, there was no entrance into heaven. No lifestyle would get us there because no man is without sin, and so no matter how one lived or believed before Christ, it was damnation all the same. So I think that this is saying that after Christ's death, when he descended into hell before his resurrection 3 days later, he grabbed Adam, Abel, Noah, Abraham, and many others who worshipped God before Christ's sacrifice, and saves them from hell, which is why the universe felt love, because Christ dove down into hell to save those who worshipped the Father before he could die for us all and rescued them from their fate. What an interesting line this is to be here, mainly because it would take a more advanced knowledge of the Christian faith to even understand what it meant, and it's not even from the source material. Really interesting job on that, devs. I love that inclusion. Let me talk about the gameplay again. This circle introduces us to these mage-like demons who have the ability to cast a sort of shield that makes them unreactive to your ranged attacks. They can also put on that shield to surrounding demons, eradicating your capability to utilize your cross until you kill them using the scythe. I found these demons to be more annoying than interesting. One thing I really noticed in this circle is that the color is being drained. The environment, the characters, everything is steadily desaturating. I'm not sure if it has been happening this whole time or if it starts in this circle, but it was a really interesting thing to note. I even thought it might have just been in this circle, but I noticed it was the same as we got to lower circles as well. Something else I noticed is that the circles seem to be getting shorter again, and the bosses less frequent as we continue on our trek. I'm not sure if this is due to the story having less interesting creatures available for inspiration on boss battles, or if it was due to budget reasons, but Heresy was another really short circle, unlike Greed. What Dante has faced so far will prove to pale in comparison to what lies below as we enter the 7th circle.
My son, within this remaining cavern, there are 3 more circles, one below another, each full of accursed spirits.
How and why are they imprisoned, those below?
The first ring is wholly of the violent. Because violence can be done to 3 persons, in 3 rounds it is divided. Violence unto one's neighbor, unto oneself, and unto God.
And below that?
Of every sin that gains hatred in heaven, fraud, because it is peculiar to man, is the most displeasing to God. Therefore the fraudulent, and then the traitors, are the lowest. and more woe assails them than all the rest.
For those paying attention so far, you may have figured out that there is a sort of theme to how Dante has placed these circles. Circles 1 through 5 represent an inability to control one's urges, and so the indulgence of the flesh. Damnation for those who simply gave in to their own nature instead of demonstrating the strength and discipline to control it. Circles 6 through 9, however, represent an intentional and very aware decision to sin. Think of it like the difference between a crime of passion and a premeditated murder. These sins are localized within the city of Dis as it spirals down into the deepest circles of hell. This is very much so in line with much of Christian theology and how God lists things depicting their purpose and how his creations act within the nature he also created. For instance, the Ten Commandments. The first 5 commandments depict man's relationship with God, and the second 5 depict man's relationship with man. Heresy was on the physical surface of Dis, which is more like a prelude to the final 3 circles, as heresy may be intentional but not in the same way that these final 3 sins are, which is why in the poem, Virgil refers to the final 3 circles as lower hell, the foulest and most horrifying circles reserved for 3 kinds of humans. Perpetrators of violence, including bestiality and I assume pedophilia, perpetrators of fraud, not limited to but especially usury, which Virgil says that since there are only 2 legitimate sources of wealth, those being natural resources and human labor, the specific sin of usury is one of the most reprehensible sins, as it is both violent and blasphemous. Blasphemy against art, which is a child of nature, and nature is God's creation. Then there is the last circle, which we'll get into later. The third deepest of the circles is violence. Virgil explains to Dante that this circle of violence is separated into 3 distinct categories: violence against one's neighbor, violence against oneself, and violence against God. In the poem, Dante and Virgil encounter a great minotaur, and it chases them into the 7th circle, and once inside, Virgil talks of the ruins scattered all over and how they came from the harrowing of hell, as a shockwave shook the whole of creation at the moment of Christ's death. In the game, however, this is turned into a massive statue that Dante utilizes to break a chain loose and allow him to continue his descent. No idea why they chose to do it this way, but it doesn't really bother me. We also meet Attila the Hun, fittingly damned to suffer just outside of the first ring of violence, as he was guilty of mass genocide. Following this, we enter into the first ring of the 7th circle. Ring 1 is for those who are violent against their fellow man, murderers, warmongers, and tyrants. They are all submerged into the phlegathon, meaning a lake of boiling blood, damned to suffer the pain and suffering of perpetually burning in the scalding liquid they loved so much to spill, and to drown in it forever, never having a moment's rest. Of course, with such visceral imagery as that, the developers were going to depict it well within the game. And the game does such a compelling job with it, you can see the hundreds of bodies splashing about in the hot red blood. We don't spend a lot of time in this first ring, however. We are introduced to a new variation of this demon with wings we can rip off. I actually think it's a shame how little time we spend in this ring. There was a lot of potential for the first ring of violence, but it's a really short little segment. I understand that the development on something like this can be rough though, so they only have so much time, and they have 2 circles of violence left to cover. We're moving on now to the second ring of the 7th circle, one that they clearly put more time into than the first one. The Wood of Suicides, those who have committed violence against oneself. The aesthetic is rich, and I think this is the only wooded area we see in the game, and it feels as isolating and suffocating as you'd hope. Decrepit dead trees hang over Dante as he runs through the wooded halls. A cool incorporation here is these pulsating fruits which pull Dante in and force him to kill himself if he is unable to resist. We do stumble upon Pietro della Vigna, a chancellor to the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. After failing to defend the honor of his master, he was thrown into prison and subsequently took his own life. In the poem, the trees actually represent the suicides themselves, as many of the souls damned become wooden and integrated into the trees, losing their body as they insulted the body they were given, and so are fixed into a wooden eternity. As self-hatred dries up the sap and energy of life, what is left is a dead tree. Dante also learns here that taking your own life is akin to throwing your body away, and so when the final judgment happens, they will not be resurrected into their bodily forms. In the game, however, some liberties are taken, as Dante finds his own mother hanging from a noose. She tells him that she could not stand his father's cruelty towards her, and that rather than stand up to him, she simply took her own life. This part I found a bit lacking. I feel like it had potential to be a powerful moment, and she could lament her decision, claiming she deserves this fate and say she failed and abandoned him, and he had the right to be angry at her. Then he could tell her that he too has deserved his fate in hell, but that forgiveness has no boundaries or conditions, forgiving her and then absolving her. Instead, she just demands that he absolves her, and while he does it, he acts confused the whole time.
Some men change, son. Others become the man they once were, the man they wish to be.
Beatrice was all I had. Why did I betray her?
It is too late for us, son. There is still time for her. Absolve me. You must save Beatrice. She is innocent.
I get that he's just been through hell, literally, but I don't know, I personally would not have written this interaction the way they did it. We are progressing now into the third ring of violence. Damned here are those who committed violence against God. A great plain of burning sand scorched by lakes of flame and fire. The phlegethon flows through here as the hot sand reflects the heat constantly on those who have been damned here.
Violence may be done against the deity by denying him in the heart.
The vengeance of God is to be feared, no?
The 7 kings who besieged Thebes reside here. They feared not that vengeance.
Dante says in his poem that there are 3 kinds of people damned here: violence against God, against God's nature, and against art, which is derived from God's nature. And if I could add my own embellishment, reflects the act of creation itself, as we are made in his image. Art is our capacity to creation. According to Dante, violence against God constitutes those who were blasphemers. Violence against nature constitutes sodomy, as the falling chunks of burning flame remind the fate of both Sodom and Gomorrah are shown. Lastly, violence against art means usury, which, for those who don't know what that means, is the act of loaning money to someone and then charging them interest as they pay it back. A more modern term you've probably heard is loan shark. It is violence against art because making money off of money is exploitive. You might wonder why this is so deep into hell, and let me explain. Throughout history, lots of religions have forbidden the act of usury in any capacity, so a loan with interest of any kind would be considered a crime or sin. The Catholic and Orthodox Church has pretty much always forbidden the charging of interest on loans, with usury being condemned in the book of Luke, and Christ driving money changers from the temples with a whip in the book of Matthew. Similarly, Islam also bans usury outright, as the Prophet Muhammad condemns it multiple times throughout the Quran. Judaism bans usury as well, but only when dealing with other Jewish people, as the Torah states that they are not to charge interest on any loan to a fellow Jew. So essentially, all 3 major Abrahamic religions forbid the act of usury in some capacity, and seeing as how they all 3 share the existence of hell, it makes sense why it'd be so deep within the circles in Dante's opinion. As we enter this final ring of violence, Dante finds his old mentor. This happens in both the poem and the game actually, but in the poem he interacts with the man, and in the game he simply absolves or punishes him. This mentor is Brunetto Latini. In the poem he refers to the man as a radiance among men, and speaks very highly of him as he held him in high regard. However, this man is damned to the burning sands for his violence against God's nature. As Dante wrote, "Clerks and great and famous scholars defiled in the world by one and the same sin," which we are led to believe was sodomy. Dante encountered a few others guilty of that same sin here as well, including the wise warrior and leader of the Guelphs, Guido Guerra. As we reach the end of this ring, Dante finds his brother-in-law and fellow warrior from the Crusades, Francesco. I don't think this was in the poem, but was instead added for the game. Francesco blames Dante for ending up where he is, and the two battle it out.
Francesco! My brother! You did this to me! Wait, listen!
You don't deserve to be my sister's slave, let alone her lord. Now pay for what you have done!
Francisco, no!
As Dante finishes his brother off, he absolves him and descends down once again. The game calls this floating platform Garion's back, but it just shows me that they were literally out of time and budget by this point in the game. In the book, Dante and Virgil mounted a giant flying beast and rode it into the 8th circle. Here, the platform just drops as you fight off some demons. I don't want to criticize it too much because, I can just tell how over it the team was at this point and how little budget they must have had left. But this is nothing like the poem at all. And although the final 3 circles of the game should have been the most intense and gruesome circles, it's the opposite. Violence is the final circle where it was clear that they were trying to fulfill some kind of artistic visualization. The 8th circle is where we finally see the game developers burn out in real time.
There is a place in hell called the Malabulge. Savages! Come and face me! Beatrice? Is that you? My love, I have come back for you as I promised.
I do not wish to see you suffer, but you leave me little choice.
I am not what you think I am.
There cannot be a rival. Lucifer forbids it.
You don't have to obey him. Come back to me.
Behold the 10 circles of fraud and deceit. Those who have broken the very bond of love and trust, in this place shall they be forever punished. Manakoda, show our guest his eternal resting place.
The 8th circle, referred to as the Malabulge, meaning evil ditches, varies pretty greatly from the book. Let's cover the concept first. Just as the circle of violence was divided into 3 separate rings to distinguish the way in which those damned were violent, this circle is the same way, but it is separated into 10 different trenches, all circling each other in a downward spiral like an amphitheater. Each of the 10 trenches is slightly different as it houses a different kind of fraudulent sin. The 10 trenches are:
Allow the sight of these ill-born souls to strike you. Below, the panderers and seducers.
Panderers and seducers. Since these people deliberately exploited other people's passions to drive their own interests, they too are damned to walk in endless lines as they are whipped by horned demons forever.
These souls below, stewed in human filth, suffer for the crime of flattery.
Flatterers, abusing and corrupting language to manipulate other people. They are buried in excrement to represent the false flatteries they told when alive.
Below are the Simonist popes, those false men of the cloth whom you followed so blindly.
Simoniacs, that is, those who are in the church and sell favors or positions for money, named after Simon Magus, who tried to pay 2 disciples of Jesus for their empowering him to impart the Holy Spirit to those he placed his hands on. We see many modern variations of simony in different churches claiming they can heal the sick and other such things in exchange for money.
If only the false prophets here could have seen your future.
Sorcerers. Dante in the book looks down from the bridge in the 4th trench and sees those who told fortunes and read palms, astrologers and diviners, false prophets. Those who attempted to read into the future are punished by having their heads twisted around their bodies into a contortion of the human body. They are then forced to walk backwards, ever more blinded by their own tears. As the poem puts it, thus those who sought to penetrate the future cannot even see in front of themselves. They attempted to move themselves forward in time, so must they go backwards through all eternity. And as the arts of sorcery are a distortion of God's law, so are their bodies distorted in hell.
The boiling pitch of the politicians, among the worst of the liars.
Barators, those in positions of political power and were corrupt, for their dark secrets and dealings, exploiting their political power for personal gain. Their punishment is to be submerged into a lake of boiling pitch, where demons called the Malabranch hunt and rip them to pieces with their claws if they are caught coming above the surface of the pitch.
You're right at home with the hypocrites, Dante, in this sixth ditch.
Hypocrites. Millions of men and women walk down a narrow path weighed down by robes made of lead, made to glow and look beautiful on the outside as a hypocrite's outward appearance suggests holiness, yet the lead interior represents the heavy weight of their deceit. Within this circle is Caiaphas, the high priest of Israel under Pontius Pilate, who advised the Pharisees to crucify Jesus. Caiaphas is crucified to the floor by 3 massive stakes to ensure that every single passing hypocrite passing by in their weighted robes must walk over him. As Dante put it, he must suffer upon his body the weight of all the world's hypocrisy.
Eternally bound in snakes, the thieves suffer below.
Thieves. A pit of reptiles, snakes, serpents, crocs, and the like. The thieves are chased and bitten by those snakes and lizards. The serpents bind the thieves' hands behind them and holds them as they are bitten even more. As their crimes in life were slow to be fully revealed, so too is their punishment.
Stay here and find company with the false advisors.
Counselors. The evil advisors lay here, not those who gave fraudulent counsel, but those who used their counsel to advise others to commit fraud. The prime example showed here is Ulysses and Diomedes, who are punished together in a giant 2-headed flame for their conception of the Trojan horse, for persuading Achilles to fight at Troy, and for stealing the sacred statue of Pallas. Dante also encounters Guido de Montefeltro, who advised Pope Boniface VIII to give a false amnesty to the Colonna family who had walled themselves inside of the castle of Palestrina. After the family accepted the amnesty and left the castle, the Pope destroyed the castle and left them with nothing. I wanted to bring this one up because this character should have been crucial to this game's plot, and he wasn't really mentioned. This needed an entire cutscene in my opinion. In the game, the story really hammers home that Dante was promised absolution for his deeds in the Holy War, and yet did not receive that. He was lied to. Dante expresses confusion about this in the game a few times, and it's never really touched on again. This character was the game's chance to resolve that thread. See, in the poem, Guido actually tells Dante that Saint Francis arrives to take his soul to heaven, as a demon suddenly arrives to take prior claim to Guido's own confusion. Pope Boniface had absolved Guido in advance for his evil advice to commit fraud against the Colonna family, so he should have been fine, right? No. The demon then explains that the absolution was invalid, saying that absolution requires contrition, and that one cannot be contrite for a sin at the same time he is intending to commit it, which would apply exactly to the game's iteration of Dante here. Sadly, they did not capitalize on this character or have a cutscene where he confronts the bishop who promised him and the rest of his brethren absolution for their deeds in the Crusades. Again though, I think the game was just out of time and money here.
The worst of the frauds, those who seed evil and discord amongst those they should trust.
Sowers of Discord. The 9th trench depicts those who sow discord being hacked and mutilated by a demon wielding a bloody sword. This ensures their bodies are divided into pieces in the same way their sin tore apart what God had intended to be united. They would rend the fabric of society to satiate their own egos, so their souls must drag their own ruined body parts across a ditch as their wounds heal and they make their way back to the demon, only to be sliced to bits again. Divided into 3 categories, these sowers of discord are guilty of causing either a religious schism, civil or political strife, or family disunion. The most prominent member among the first category, someone who the game left out but Dante wanted to put in, is Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Dante believed that Islam caused a schism within Christianity, and so he was guilty of sowing discord among the Christian religion.
The final ditch. Below are the fakes, society's plague, who suffer for eternity in disease.
Lastly, we have the 10th trench, for the falsifiers. Since Dante thought these people a disease on society, they are damned with constant afflictions. Some are forever starving, others laying in constant pulsating pain, etc. This circle is for the alchemists, those who fake things, the counterfeiters, those who fake money, the perjurers, those who fake words, and the imposters, those who falsify their own identity as someone they're not. Now that we've touched on the premise of each trench, let's cover how the game went about depicting all of this. It didn't. After first arriving in this circle, Virgil is noticeably absent and will not reappear until we finish this circle. This is so they can have Dante encounter Beatrice and deal with her for this circle. Yeah, like I said earlier, this plot thread with Beatrice is a little cringy and the worst part of the game. Dante has to fight Malakota here, which is a demon from the poem. However, in the book, Malakota is in the 5th trench, but in the game, he's just a tough demon we face before we enter the circle at all. From here, we descend the 10 trenches of fraud, and the game goes about this by having 10 nearly identical arenas, each with a different gameplay challenge the player must complete before moving on. The only difference is the platforming is a little different each time, but the arenas are nearly the same. The only relevance these rooms have to the poem is the statues on each side of the bridge, and the dialogue of Beatrice describing the purpose of the trench. We don't see much in the way of references to the poem visually. I'm going to cover each of the shades Dante encounters in this circle since they're the only relevance to the poem. As we enter the first trench challenge, we encounter Thais the Harlot, who was once beautiful but now ugly, damned here for flattery as she loved watching other men kill each other for the chance at sleeping with her. The next shade we find is Tiresias, a blind prophet of Thebes, damned to the circle of fraud for changing himself from a man to a woman to indulge in the pleasures of both. And last is Myra, the daughter of the king of Assyria, who pretended to be someone else in order to seduce her own father. At last, we arrive to the end of the circle of fraud, where Dante tries to tell Beatrice he has faced his sins, and she mocks him for it.
Beatrice, stop this. I have faced all my sins, and I am ready to take you home.
All your sins? I think not.
Look into the 9th circle of hell. Look into the dark, cold realm of the traitors.
God in heaven. Who is responsible for this?
Take care of my sister. I am responsible.
Hang him. Prepare to march tonight. When the noble Saladin learns of this atrocity,
He will bring forth the forces of hell.
Beatrice, I will protect you.
You condemned my brother to death for your crime! What is your answer for this treachery?
No. I give up on this journey. My place is here in hell. Yours is in paradise. I am truly sorry for what I have done. May you one day forgive me.
My cross.
Beatrice.
You've done well, Dante. And though you may not understand it now, you have saved much more than this innocent soul. For your role in the ongoing battle is more important than you can possibly imagine.
I don't understand.
Your redemption is near.
Wait! I have to take care of her. I have come this far.
Trust me. You will see her again.
Dante finally gives up here. Dropping his pride and determination, he offers his true repentance, which brings Beatrice to forgiveness, as she returns to her proper spiritual self and an angel comes down from heaven. This is the only time we see an angel in the game, as he tells Dante he did well and takes Beatrice to heaven. There's only one more circle remaining, as Dante continues onward to finish his quest, the deepest circle for the lowest of sins.
Spur yourself onward, Dante. The final circle is near.
What city is this that lies ahead?
Because you pierce the darkness from afar, you stray in your imagination. When you reach the place below, you will see plainly how the sense is deceived by distance. These are not towers, but giants.
The central well of the Malabulge, frozen over in icy tundras and freezing winds. Here lay giants, stuck in ice and unable to move. Thinking at first that they were towers representing a city, they instead turn out to be giant humans whose lower halves cannot even be seen below the icy surface. Among them are Nimrod, the man who attempted to build the Tower of Babel, Ephialtes, who tried to storm Olympus, Briarus, who tried to challenge God, and others. But before we descend down further into the breach, Dante encounters Fra Albergo, who killed his own son for revenge, betraying his family and country. This sets the stage for what this circle holds. The game does show us the Well of Malabulge, but unfortunately skips the 4 rounds of hell before reaching the center. In Dante's poem, he had to go through 4 different rounds of the 9th circle, so I'll just touch on them really quick. All 4 rounds lay within the frozen lake of Cocytus, but are divided for different forms of treachery, which in all its forms is a denial of love, which love itself is God. These are the furthest removed from light and the warmth of the sun itself. Round 1 is called Cana, deriving its name from Cain, the first murderer and the man who killed his own brother. Here are damned those who betrayed their kin, as they are submerged in ice from the neck down. Round 2 is called Antenora, named after Antenor, the Trojan soldier who betrayed his city to the Greeks. This round punishes those who were traitors to their country, such as the treasonous politicians or those who committed treason against political entities. Round 3 is Ptolemaea, named after Ptolemy, who invited his father-in-law and sons to a banquet just to murder them. Here are those punished for betraying their guests, frozen in ice with tears frozen in their eye sockets. They are denied even the comfort of weeping. Round 4 is Giudecca, 4th division of the lake and named after Judas Iscariot. Here, those who are traitors to their lords are punished for eternity. There is no sound in Giudecca, as it is entirely quiet. All of the sinners here are encapsulated in ice, twisted and distorted in every misshapen pose imaginable. They are totally immobile. Then we reach the final round.
For betraying the love and trust that nature makes, at the center of the universe, in the seat of the devil himself, every traitor is consumed eternally.
The game substitutes all of these rounds instead for a minigame where Dante slowly makes his way across an unstable ice bridge, at the end of which we encounter Count Ugolino. This man aligned himself against whomever he thought would benefit him, playing both sides and switching allegiances. And down we fall into the center of hell, where Lucifer is condemned for the ultimate sin of treachery against God. Now here in the poem, Dante and Virgil make their way past the frozen, entombed Lucifer and through the center of the universe and gravity, where they will move on into purgatory. This is where our journey with the poem ends. We've gone through a basic but limited telling of the poem so far, but we're here for the game. So of course, they made Lucifer a battle. Dante fights Lucifer in 2 phases, the second of which I will not be showing on screen because it has imagery I am not risking on YouTube. The battle felt way harder at first until I realized I could just use holy armor and get through it way easier. As Dante arrives in this arena, Lucifer tells Dante that Beatrice was just bait to trick Dante into freeing Lucifer from the giant form that imprisoned Lucifer. Dante eventually realizes he is outmatched and calls upon the souls he has absolved throughout the journey to assist him in undoing what he has done. Then he himself is allowed into purgatory, where he rips off the cross sewn into his chest and begins his journey for redemption. The main campaign is not all that Dante's Inferno has to offer. Once you complete the game, you unlock a harder difficulty, a new game plus mode, and a bonus game mode called Gates of Hell. You also unlock Dante's Crusader outfit. The harder difficulty and new game plus mode are exactly what they sound like, but the Gates of Hell is actually a full additional game mode where you play the arena of the game where Dante arrives at Hell's Gate, but you play it over and over with different types of enemies each time in a wave-based game mode. You are given a timer which you can earn additional seconds by performing certain combos or dispatching a wave in an expedient time. There's only 50 waves to get through, which I did not do, but I got to like 40 something on my one attempt. All you get for beating it is an achievement and a high score. I'm not covering the Trials of St. Lucia since it was a DLC and isn't relevant to the main game. I will, however, talk about the animated movie adaptation of the game, which surprisingly stars Mark Hamill as Dante's father. This ambitious animated epic is a movie adaptation of the game, which is an adaptation of the poem. The movie is EA branded and uses the same music and designs from Visceral Games' video game. It is not a direct adaptation, however, and the narrative of the movie is actually better than the game in a few ways. First off, the dialogue feels much more period appropriate, and surprisingly, although it is adapting the game, it brings in scenes from the poem that weren't in the game. One of the biggest differences is that in the game, Dante fights with Death's scythe after facing off against the Reaper because he is killed in the intro. In the movie, he is alive when he descends into the Inferno, like he was in the book, and so he just rips a similar looking scythe away from one of the demons attempting to kill him. The movie gives significantly more screen time to Beatrice than the game did too. Dante is still depicted as just as much of a scumbag in the movie as he was in the game, but it's somehow even worse because without all of the video game segments, we aren't playing as him and don't feel attached to him. He really is a monster in this movie. He admits in the movie that he has lost his faith, so his descent has a different kind of power as we see him face his sins. I have to say about the animation too, it is stellar. The scene where the tapestry is weaved into Dante's flesh is far more appropriate and bleak in the movie than it is in the game. He's coated in blood as demonic hands forcibly sew his sins into his chest. The animation also changes up throughout the movie across various circles. The way the characters look varies pretty heavily depending on which circle you're watching them get through. The conversation between Dante and his mother is much better executed in the movie than it was in the game too, far more focused and more powerful. The game is not for everyone. I enjoy it, but I recognize also some people don't want to play through an old Xbox 360 game to see a story. That's why I watch a lot of videos like this one I'm making. The movie, on the other hand, I highly recommend it. Seriously, it is intense, and it's only about an hour and a half. I really encourage you to give it a chance. It can be rented on YouTube for very cheap. It is a very adult, very graphic movie though. Probably don't watch it more than once. If you're interested in the narrative, I think the movie does a much better job of telling the game's story than the game itself does. And it also seems to pay as much, if not more, respect to the source material of the poem. The ending is the biggest deviation from the game, and in the best and most compelling way. Instead of calling on the souls he had absolved, he relinquishes his journey and humbles himself to ask Almighty God to intervene and give him the strength to stop Lucifer from escaping. I felt chills as I watched that sequence. Dante's Inferno, an animated epic, gets my firm recommendation to watch. There's one other piece of Dante's Inferno media I have to talk about though. Two incredibly well-animated and high-quality fan-made short films called Dante's Redemption and Dante's Redemption Act 1. The first of which is a short CGI recap of the game's story up until the Circle of Lust. It's more a proof of concept than anything. The second video is an even higher quality telling of Dante's entering into hell and his coming to terms with his betrayal of Beatrice, also his lie to her that he didn't do so. I think it's set in the 7th circle as Dante is overcome and stabbed. We do get to see a fully animated sequence of him using multiple of his powers from the game though, which is really stellar. It ends by sequel baiting a crossover sequel episode as well, but for a fan-made project, really cool. That's it for my retrospective analysis of EA's Dante Inferno by Visceral Games. It was really a blast to play through, and although there were plans in motion for a sequel, it never happened. The fact that this game is sort of a one-and-done experience makes it feel even more special. There aren't many games out there like this, I feel, especially with this model of a supplementary animated movie to go with it. Even when Dante wrote his poem, Inferno, it was provocative even for his time, and I feel like this iteration remains provocative still. The way it presents itself makes it a difficult and inaccessible experience to so many people, both religious and non alike, that I'm astonished Visceral was even able to talk EA into funding this thing. The gameplay is tight, crisp, and fun. The music is powerful and daunting, and the narrative is an adaptation of a timeless classic. Though the dialogue does fall short in a few places, and the liberties the developers took with the poem's narrative are pretty hit or miss, definitely more so the latter, the story is still compelling to watch. Dante's tale has gone on to inspire literally thousands of other stories since it was written, with references to the circles of hell or a journey of descent through hell being utilized by so much media that it's commonplace. Keep an eye out, you'll see mentions of the circles of hell everywhere. His poem has gone on to influence culture an immense amount, so getting to see it all realized in such a gruesome interpretation was really a treat for me. Alright EA, come on, you've given me a Dead Space remake, throw some money at an HD remaster of this game and have it ported to the PC. The fact that this game remains exclusive to the 360 and PS3 is a damn shame. EA Games is sitting on a pretty solid profit margin if they'd find a studio to polish the gameplay, raise the resolution, and port this thing to the PC. I'm not asking for a modern remake because I think most would deem it too offensive in its current state and remove some crucial elements from the game, so I'd rather they just put it on PC. I mean, really, they don't even need to HD remaster it. I guarantee the fans would do it if it was just on PC already. As of now, if you're wanting to play Dante's Inferno for yourself, you're either going to need to have a PS3 or an Xbox 360. There's a PSP version which is similar, but that would probably not be the best way to experience it. The other option would be hardware emulation, but I advocate having either purchased the game in the past before doing this or buy it now. As of recording this audio, I own a physical copy of the game. Okay, wow, this game was a journey. Thanks so much to all of you for watching. I really loved this game when I was younger, and I've been itching to make this video for over a year now. I hope that this has brought you some insight into both the game and the poem, which can be read online for free if you're interested. If you haven't yet, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel to support me making more retrospectives like this one. I have a few more in the works right now that I think you guys will enjoy. Check out my Linktree in the description to keep up with everything I'm working on, join my Discord to come hang out with me and my crew, and follow me on Twitter to see what I'm up to next. That's all from me, and I'll see you in the next video.